And so I want to read from Genesis chapter 2, a very simple passage at the end of the creative act. And I want to read it. Let's read it in the beginning of our reading as if we're reading it for the first time and we don't know the New Testament. We don't know Jesus is coming. We don't know about the cross or the resurrection. That's impossible for us to really do that because we're cheating. We already know. We have to play along for a moment and go, what if I didn't know there was a Jesus coming? What might I be able to take away from this? Genesis chapter 2, verse 1. Thus the heavens and the earth and all the host of them were finished. And on the seventh day God ended His work which He had done, and He rested on the seventh day from all His work which He had done. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it He rested from all His work which God had created and made. I want to ask you a rhetorical question. Why does God take a break after 6 days? Is God tired? Is God worn out? Has God exhausted His abilities? Has He run out of things to create? No. Well, those are good questions. I think they're good questions. And if I didn't know Jesus was coming, I might go, well, it looks to me like after 6 days, God's pretty tired. I mean, how would you not be tired? You hung the heavens and the earth and you put everything on them. It would wear me out. And I need a day off. And so God takes that famous seventh day off, that day of rest. But knowing what we know about the creation story, now we put our Jesus lens back on, knowing what we know about where the story is going, knowing what we know about a man named Rest that's coming on the scene, what it tells us is that in the heart of God, God rests when He finishes, and He doesn't rest till He finishes. And so God does the work completely, and then God rests. And so what God is telling us through what we know is coming in the Word is that there's several things we can take away from it. One of the things that we can take away, I think of, is to learn the value of rest. To learn that if God did it, maybe we should too. To learn the value of finishing. If God finished before He rested, maybe we need to see something as finished before we rest. That's good advice in our practical life. I mean, if you know you have something to do and you need to get it done before you can relax, it's hard to relax when it's undone, because you're thinking, I got to do that thing, and I can't really rest because I have to do that thing. So in a practical sense, it's I've got to finish so that I can rest. In a spiritual sense, how can I rest if I think my soul is unfinished, if I think my spirit is unfinished, if I think my blessing is unfinished? How can I possibly come to a place of rest? And so it also tells me this: God doesn't stop at the end of the first week. How many of you realize there was a Sunday, and then a Monday, and then a Tuesday? God rolls the calendar over, and every reader of that story realizes that there's not 8 days in the week, there are 7 days in the week. And God rests on the seventh and then starts over on the first, which tells us that God's rest only comes when He's finished working, and it always preludes a new work. So the rest day kicks off a new work week. And so what I think God is showing us in Genesis is, He's not tired, by the way. I'll answer the rhetorical question. I don't think He's tired. I don't think God's exhausted and went, well, I need a day off after this creative process. But the Word is written for us, not for God. And so being written for us, it's to say, watch for rest. Rest is as important as creation. Rest is as important as doing. We'll do. We get to the end, we rest. What comes out of our rest? Doing something else. And so it's not an earning necessarily of the rest, it's learning where to take the rest and learning how to take the rest. And I have found that's the great challenge of Christianity, is learning how to take a true spiritual rest, learning how to really relax in who He is and just see how the work got finished. Now, I want to progress for just a moment, because that's Genesis 2. We're very early in the corpus. There's a whole lot of stuff that's going to come after Genesis 2. We're going to get into the Adam and Eve story. We see the fall. We see that Cain and Abel. We've got the ark. We go all the way through the tribes of Israel. We take Israel into bondage and we bring them out of Egypt. And there's not a lot of mention of this rest thing anymore, not in those terms. But go with me to Exodus chapter 20, because I want to take you to the establishment of the Mosaic law in Exodus 20. And I want to show you, I don't only want to look at the pronouncement of the Sabbath day in the Ten Commandments. I want to look at the wording of the pronouncement of the Sabbath day in the Ten Commandments because I think sometimes this gets missed. Exodus chapter 20, verse 8, God told Israel this, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Now we've all read that and quoted that. This is God talking to a people who have never had the law of Sabbath, right? And yet He doesn't say, remember the Sabbath day and establish it as holy. He says, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, which means it's already holy. What I'm asking you to do, what I'm telling you to do, this is God speaking through the law, what I'm telling you to do is keep rest as a part of your existence. It's not establish rest, it's keep rest. You should have already been doing this. This should have already been part of your personal creative process, was learning how to take a real rest. Verse 9, 6 days you labor and you do all your work, but on the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed, past tense, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day, and He hallowed it. Not, I bless it now, but I blessed it then. When? Genesis 2. All this is past tense. So God says, I blessed it then. I never talked to you about it from Genesis 2. I haven't made it a command because it's supposed to have been part of your life. Part of your life was realizing that you had to take a rest. Now, where did they probably figure this out? Well, naturally, we probably figured it out when someone passed out in the field and fell over and died of exhaustion, or at least fell asleep somewhere trying to work, because we started to realize from our early iteration, we got to take a break sometime. If we don't take a break, our work is actually going to suffer. That if we don't rest, we may work longer, but we'll get less done. And so when God established the law, it's not as if He throws it at them for the first time. He just reiterates it and goes, I've already hallowed it. I've already made it holy. God had already sanctified. Sanctified is the word for set aside, by the way. Hope you also realize the word sanctified is the same word in the Bible used for the word holy. When you talk about holiness, you're talking about sanctification. If God has sanctified you, God has made you holy. Notice that man doesn't set the day aside. God sets the day aside. Therefore, God sanctified rest. Man doesn't sanctify rest. Man just participates in rest. We don't create rest. This is important. We don't create rest spiritually. We enter rest spiritually. The reason I'm bringing this past tense stuff up is back at the time God gave Israel the Sabbath day command, it was already spoken into existence. He had already sanctified it. He had already made it holy. He had already declared it. Their job was not to create space to rest. Their job was to rest. Now, the reason I'm emphasizing that is because if we miss that here in this portion of the message, what it tells me is that we've missed the fact that rest is something to be entered into, not something to achieve. We don't achieve rest after we've worked for God, then we get to rest. We enter rest because I don't sanctify rest, God sanctified rest. If God sanctified rest, all I can do is figure out how to enter into it. And entering into it by the time of Jesus had become a problem. By the time Jesus arrives, entering into rest was a serious issue.